Good afternoon. This is Humma Khan from Radio Humma Khan. Today we will be talking about the situation in Palestine, and I'm very privileged to have with me today Ambassador of Palestine, Professor Manuel Hassassian. Thank you so much, sir, and I am so very glad that you have spared your precious time to share your thoughts with us today about the current situation in Palestine. Before we start addressing what is currently going on and has been going on for many years, I would really like you to say a few words about yourself so that those who are listening and watching us can get to know you. Sir?
Thank you very much for coming to our embassy. It's first of all, let me start by saying that we applaud the position of Pakistan when it comes to the support of the Palestinian people.
Thank you.
And we have seen their support and readiness to help in the reconstruction of Gaza. And of course, their moral and political and diplomatic support is unparalleled with other countries. But let me introduce myself to you.
Yes, please.
You know, probably my name sounded a little bit, strange to you and to many others. Because, we are always used to Muslim names in the Arab world. But my name is Manuel Hassassian. I am an Armenian by ethnic origin. I'm Christian by religion. I'm Catholic by denomination.
Right.
I'm Palestinian by birth and citizenship. I'm an Arab by nationality and a Muslim by culture.
Right.
So this is how I introduce myself, to the media and to the outside. And this just popped on me when I was giving a lecture at Cambridge University.
Okay.
And when one of the faculty members who were attending, they were surprised about my name, how come he is the ambassador of Palestine? So, the stereotype images of Muhammad, Ahmad, and Mustafa. So when I introduced myself this way, they were baffled to know that there are Christians in Palestine. And the Christians are represented in a secular government, especially the PLO. Now, as far as the current situation, as you know, this saga keeps on continuing every 2-3 years. It is so unfortunate that Europe, America, and others forget about the root causes of the conflict, and they just talk about the reaction of the Palestinians who have the right to resist under the International Geneva Convention as being occupied, and forget about the occupier that pretends to be a democracy and being hailed by the international community. At the same time, it's one of the most repulsive occupations in modern history.
Right.
And the Israelis, have shown many times that their intentions are not peace. Their intentions is to grab more land, build more settlements, and displace the Palestinians out of their country. Now, this systematic policy has been continuing for the last 54 years now. We've been under occupation for that long, one of the longest occupation in modern history. So, after the ceasefire, of course, business goes as usual. Israelis, rest, and they start, their series of putting people in jail, create new facts on the ground, and continue with the instigation of the Palestinians in Al-Aqsa Mosque and in all areas that have close geographic proximity with settlements. So they give the settlers still the free hand. Even after the ceasefire, we have seen settlers coming to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and still instigating the Palestinians who are praying in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Yesterday, today, every day, the saga continues. Israel is not interested in peace. Israel is trying to buy time to go for another round of violence, and this is, I see it coming very soon, because their systematic policy in Al-Aqsa and in Sheikh Jarrah, and of course, you know, in all the West Bank, when they have all kinds of checkpoints and hot pursuit and what have you, this is not ceasefire. Ceasefire is the cessation of the mutual bombing, reaction rockets and what have you. This is ceasefire. But the ceasefire, you know, and this violence ended up in destruction. Gaza is destroyed. And people, unfortunately, equate the impact of these rockets that are nothing in comparison with the heavy, you know, machines, artillery, arms that Israel and the jet fighters that Israel is using. Almost more than 260 people have been killed. So many have been injured, more than 6,000. And if you look on the Israeli side, I mean, you cannot compare the figures. No. 13 people and few have been injured, whatever. It is so unfortunate that, you know, the international community, especially Europeans and Americans, they put the Palestinians on equal footing with the Israelis. Yeah. So they stop talking about the root causes of the problem and they talk about Hamas's rockets. Yeah. Hamas came into the fight at a later stage and it did not instigate the war. Hamas was reacting to what is happening in Al-Aqsa Mosque and in Jerusalem and in all the West Bank. So now to end it up that Israel has the right to defend itself, what about Palestinians' right to defend themselves?
Where is their self-defense? Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, so...
And sir, if I just may go back to this, we will come back to this human rights report that was published on the 27th of April 2021, and we can see what they're asking from the world to you know, address this ongoing you know, atrocities for many years now. But just wanted to hear your thoughts about this latest escalation. And as you say, it's a ceasefire, but it's a break, right? It's a break because it's a cycle, so it keeps coming back. You know, and as you say, you see it, you know, happen sometime soon. If we just look at this 11 days of atrocities and mass murder by Israel, we can see 248 Palestinians died, 66 children, and thousands of injured, of course. Who will be responsible for this? These are lives that we have lost, children.
You see,
and we are celebrating a ceasefire.
Yeah. Well, actually, let me tell you this. First of all, the international community should shoulder the responsibility of this carnage, because they are letting Israel getting away with impunity. Tell me, so many UN Security Council resolutions, General Assembly, show me one has been implemented when it comes to Israel. It has always been vetoed, and if not vetoed, not implemented, because Israel is still considered above international law, totally supported by the United States and supported by the European Union. Now, don't be fooled by nice words that we believe in two-state solution, that we believe Jerusalem should be left to the final status talks, that the 1967 is the boss. These are nice rhetorical, polemical talks. But on the ground, what did Europe and America achieve when it comes to two-state solution? Nothing. We made our historic compromise in 1988 when we accepted the state of Israel, and then we said, okay, we will accept 22% of historic Palestine to have our own independent Palestinian state, and that was our national project. Since then, look how many years now, and to no avail. And if you look today at the West Bank, it is like, you know, an island of archipelago.
6.8 million Palestinians living there.
Yes, and you know, it's like a Swiss cheese with no geographic contiguity. You have more than 700,000 settlers, more than 240 settlements in the occupied territories today, let alone the contours of Jerusalem. And then we come and tell the international community, what can we do more than keep on conceding to the Israelis so as we can get our national aspirations fulfilled? What did the international community do so far since the Oslo Agreement? We see the expansion of settlements 3 times. We've seen 5 times, you know, the figures of the settlers in the occupied territories. We see an Arab world that is normalizing, unfortunately, with Israel. We see our, you know, international aligned countries are, you know, with no potential whatsoever to put pressure on the United States. And we have been the victims of what we call, I mean, not conspiracy as much as the irrelevance of the Palestinian on the international agenda. Israel has maintained a good PR for the last 70 years. And it had won the people from the mandate until, you know, the Second World War with the Holocaust and what have you. And Europe is still paying for the Holocaust, paying for what they did to the Jews in Europe at the expense of the Palestinians. Here comes the immigrants, you know, flooding, you know, Palestine under the rubric that they are escaping the Holocaust and what have you. With the Balfour Declaration of 1917, that infamous declaration that started basically the Jewish immigration to come to Palestine, continued by the Nazi Germany persecution of the Jews, we ended up paying for the mistakes of Europe in dealing, you know, with the Jewish issue. This issue should have been solved in Europe, not at the expense of the Palestinians. So historically, we cannot accept, although we opened our arms for the first Jewish aliyahs, believing that we can coexist with them, but the Zionist project have proven that they are there as a colonial settler movement. The international community does not look at Israel as an occupying power. It is so unfortunate.
But it says in the reports, and we will get back to that.
This is human rights report.
Human Rights Watch
I'm talking not about NGOs, and I'm not talking about peoples in the world. And today, when you look at the coverage of the carnage in Gaza and in the West Bank, the entire international community, when we talk about people, are siding with the Palestinians, are supporting the Palestinians, are empathizing with the Palestinians. I'm talking here about governments and not NGOs like human rights, like B'Tselem in Israel, that also came out with reports saying that Israel is practicing apartheid. Now, we have to make the distinction here.
Yes.
But my criticism is against governments. I can't see what does the United States wants from the Palestinians, I mean, to do on the ground, so as you know, we could go back to the negotiating table. We have been attacked, displaced, you know.
Unarmed civilians
are being killed. And you know, a footnote, I would like to know how many Hamas militants, according to the West, have been killed. I would like to know to what extent they have destroyed the military infrastructure of Hamas. It's so coward just to go and bomb these towers, these buildings with the rubbles, you know, with people under the rubbles and what have you. So coward from the air, you come just and keep on dropping all these bombs on buildings.
Ethnic
and
cleansing.
This is ethnic
cleansing.
This is ethnic cleansing has different dimensions. One of them is this. The other ethnic cleansing is trying to push the Palestinians to leave their country by settlers, you know, pushing forward, attacking people in their houses, burning their orchards and what have you. And recently they attacked 3 Armenian priests who were going to pray in the Holy Supper. What did these priests do to them? They just attacked them and they are hospitalized. We did not see any condemnation coming from from Western Europe or from the United States. I mean, it is a shame that this propaganda machine I don't know to what extent the PR that is done by the United States could go further than seeing the atrocities and trying to defend Israel, you know, by giving it the green light, you know, in the amidst of the struggle, amidst of the war on Gaza. The United States offers $750 million worth of military arms to Israel. What does that mean? You know, Biden is a sweet talker, but what did we see from Biden? He kept on continuing in supporting Netanyahu, giving him more time under the pretext that he is destroying the Hamas infrastructure.
It's a shame, sir. And coming back, as you mentioned, the governments, what they're doing. So you are in Denmark. So I was thinking, has there been any talks with the Danish government about this, or would you want to comment on that?
Yes. I have met in the Foreign Office the director of MENA, Middle East, North Africa. I have, of course, parliamentarians who are in opposition, you know, always in contact with me on Zoom and what have you. I've talked to representatives of the Social Democratic Party, who are the ruling party. Beyond moral sympathy on an individual level. Okay. They said, we bid you condolences for those who have died. But on the government level, officially, everybody was attacking Hamas as if Hamas started the war, as if Hamas is a terrorist, and that of Israel, practices of state terrorism, is self-defense. It is so unfortunate.
Sir, it's like, as you would say, that if we have a disease in the body and you have symptoms, so if we are just looking at the symptoms, we are not looking at the actual illness that we need to get rid of.
Very well put by you, but you asked me a specific question.
Yes.
And my question to you, the Danish government, as far as I'm concerned, is not being fair in this conflict. I don't want to be more vociferous about it.
More can be done, sir. More can be done.
But it's not enough.
No.
Don't preach me about human rights, for crying out loud. This is the ultimate hypocrisy that I found when I came to Denmark. And I make the distinction between people and what have you. But my feeling here, I don't feel at ease in Denmark because I can see the air of pestilence when it comes to racism. We foreigners are not welcomed here. That's my personal feeling. I hope I'm wrong, but this is how I see things. Okay? And the Danish government, and I made, you know, my criticism very obvious. I say I had like 15 interviews. You know, if I were in London, maybe 120 during the last 2 days. Last week, I mean, when the conflict. Because when I was in London, I left with 800 interviews on major televisions. I'm not mentioning radio, all right? But still, you know, while I'm here, these reporters and television are still asking me for interviews. Not a single interview in mainstream. You know what I told them? Frankly, I said I had one interview on Pakistani radio and one interview from extreme leftist communist, and nothing from the mainstream media. Nothing, not a single interview. For crying out loud, you don't care to hear the Palestinian perspective, and you are ignoring what is happening in Gaza and in the West Bank, and we don't want moral sympathy anymore. Don't empathize with me. Don't tell me, you know, my condolences.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
This is personal. But when it comes, I mean, to the actual conflict, I am really shocked. In one of the most supposedly liberal countries in the world, I don't see any coverage of the Palestinian perspective on this conflict.
Like,
only I got criticism that Hamas should stop. Hamas is a terrorist country. I mean, for crying out loud. Haven't you even thought when you said this that Gaza, 14 years under siege, under embargo, 2 million Palestinians in such a small stretch piece of land,
very
have been engulfed and living like in an open air prison. You don't want them to defend themselves? Why don't you switch roles? Let's assume that Israel is in the position of the Palestinians. Let's assume the children's number in Israel and not on the Palestinian side. You know, you could have erased the Palestinians, erased them, you know. So this bias,
yes, this
I
bias
mean,
from
is
the
not
media.
acceptable,
No.
and it is really shameful.
Absolutely, I fully agree, sir, and that's why it's so important just to keep communicating. I think that's what we can do, and that's why I'm so thankful that you're sharing your thoughts with us here today. One last question that I would like to ask is about the recent Human Rights Watch report that was actually published on the 27th of April 2021, and this is published on the internet. You can go and read this as well, and it's stated actually in the conclusion that Human Rights Watch is saying that Israel is committing the crime of apartheid by seeking to maintain Jewish domination over Palestinians, and in addition to apartheid, it's persecution as well. So crimes of apartheid and prosecution. At the end of this report, they're actually coming up with some recommendations, and I would really like to hear your thoughts about these recommendations that they're coming up with. So from the European Union and its members, what they're asking is that the European Union and member states should issue public statements of concern regarding Israeli authorities' commission of the crimes of apartheid and persecution. They're saying that the European Union and its member states should impose targeted sanctions against individuals and entities found to be responsible for the continued commission of grave international crimes, including apartheid and persecution. They're saying the European Union and its member states should support the establishment of a UN envoy on the crimes of apartheid and persecution. What are your thoughts about this, sir? And in addition to this, they also want, the international community to step up. And do you see this happening? These recommendations that they're coming up with?
Let me tell you, history is repeating itself. In 1975, not 2021, the United Nations made a resolution equating Zionism with racism. 1975. Okay? Now, from 1975 to 2021, how many years? Almost 46 years.
46 years.
In 46 years, almost the West Bank is gone. The killings of thousands, the incarceration of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, the destruction of Gaza so many times, the destruction of the West Bank, almost 5 million people, Palestinians living under occupation, 2 million living in an open air concentration camp, hot pursuits, incarcerating people without due process of law. I mean, this has been continuing for the last 50 years. Now, these reports, there was also a very important report that came from Harvard several years ago talking about the Zionist lobby in the United States and how they are affecting the decision-making process. So you can tie that with what is happening in this report. Now, Bet Salem comes up with reports, Human Rights Watch, Human Rights Commission, and what have you. For me, it is, that's the absolute truth because, they write what they see. But what are the mechanisms of implementation? Now we are pursuing, we Palestinians are pursuing the war criminals, war crimes through the international, which the ICC, which the United States is opposing. They are flexing muscles for us not to go ahead with the indictment, of these war crimes. Europe, what is Europe doing? This report came, a big fanfare, and then things subside. And what Israel is doing is continuing with its consistent policy of apartheid, and the latest naked brute aggression against the Palestinians is the crescendo of apartheid. So even Israel, after reading this, they care less because they consider themselves above the law. And that, I mean, privilege that they have is supported by the United States and some of the allies of the United States, let alone, I mean, Europe. Europe is very apologetic,
But this is
unfortunately.
insanity, sir. This is just insanity.
This is where I say there is no fairness. There is no justice. World public opinion should change. And you see, I think Israel maybe destroyed Gaza, but they lost the international public opinion.
Yes, true.
Because all these, I mean, demonstrations, hundreds of thousands, all over the world, they have showed to what extent Israel is an apartheid state.
Absolutely.
But how can we now try to capitalize, you know, on this wave of support to the Palestinian people? We don't want it to subside. You know, it's like a flare. It comes and then it subsided. Because Israel realizes people will forget after, you know, a month or whatever. Now we are resolute as Palestinians to continue our peaceful demonstrations and our peaceful struggle against, you know, this apartheid regime until we get, you know, our inalienable rights of having our independent state with East Jerusalem as our capital. I mean, the Palestinians are not going to sit idle. If there is a ceasefire today in Gaza, but the confrontations are going to continue in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, and inside what we call the Green Zone, our Palestinian Israeli citizens. And today, they started with 30,000 police force spread all over Israel to detain all those who have been, you know, participating in demonstrations inside the Green Zone among Palestinian Israelis, let alone in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. And look, go to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's a garrison. They closed all the gates. They're not allowing anybody to go in. So what this ceasefire means to us as Palestinians? Nothing.
It's just a
nothing.
Just a break.
Israel is trying to catch its breath for another round of violence.
Sir, what would you like to say at the end? Which message do you want to give to the world?
I want to say to the world, enough is enough. It is a shame that the Palestinians, after so many decades, have been struggling to get their self-determination, and 160 countries in the world cannot really put pressure on Israel to withdraw to the 1967 based on UN resolutions, based on the international community, based on the quartet, based on the peace initiative that was given by the Arabs in 2002 in Lebanon, in Beirut, and to continue watching the Palestinians being massacred every day. I think this is a badge of dishonor on the international community. And it's not enough people just go out and demonstrate. They should change governments that are so biased and pro-Israel because they are weak, they are submissive to that of the United States of America. It's about time for Europe and others to wake up and to say, enough is enough. We cannot continue with apartheid. Imagine this country, Denmark, small country, was among the avant-garde countries to fight apartheid in South Africa. But when it comes to the Palestinians, they are sitting on deaf ears. Why? Why? Why is this discrimination against the Palestinians? Why can't they be in the forefront of boycotting Israel, boycotting settlement goods and what have you, and be vociferous enough in coming up with a statement? Don't hide behind the polemical, rhetorical position of the EU. We want you to get out of the closet.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your thoughts and sparing your precious time to talk about Palestine.
It's my duty, ma'am. It's my duty.
So you heard the thoughts, you heard the feelings, and I think it's about time that we wake up. We wake up and we stand, to stand with the Palestinian brothers and sisters and what they're going through. Thank you so much, sir. Once again.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.